But it doesn't matter if I ever experience it firsthand. I never have, but I don't like standing around the ring. I'm lazy. But I mean, I'm in this job for God's sake. But it doesn't really matter what we call these stories. It matters that we pass them on because the Great American Ghost Story is a shared heritage. There's just candidates that work in the experiences beyond the time we live in, beyond our petty boundaries of nationality and race. It was one way from the beginning of time that all people had to pass on their hopes, their fears, and their thousands from one generation to the next. And these stories don't belong to tour companies and tour guides, they belong to you. Now I want to take you to one more place and tell you about where there was more death, more absolute gore and carnage than even the LaLaurie. These things go well above and beyond the code noir. I mean, this is illegal, but nobody did anything about it because it's impolite to write out those of your social strata here in New Orleans. They say reconciliatory things, of course, things they like, now Mr. Beauregard, you know good and well if it was all that bad up in LaLaurie's house, one of us would have went to the sheriff by now. I know that I would have. Certainly you would, yes, sir? Yes, sir. Yeah. So would I. Mr. Boudreaux, I know you would, yes, sir? Yes, sir. Mr. Thibodeau, wouldn't you, sir? Yes, sir. So would we all. Good for us, yeah. But truth be told, they were indifferent. And if there's a lesson we learn from history, it's that indifference breeds honesty. We set a horrible precedent with this house. It influenced the 20th century in ways we couldn't imagine at the time. Finally, though, in spring of 1834, it came to a big head. There was a party letting out a block over on Ursuline Street. The cops split it up. They said, you got to take that out of town. Been there, done that. So they had to come down this street, Royal. Happens a lot in this neighborhood. As they come down Royal through this intersection, they said they heard a woman's voice screaming, screeching, and cursing at the top of her lungs. When they walk around that side of the house, they can look through a break in the wall, which we will pass. They're able to look up across the courtyard to a third-story gallery. And that's where Delphine LaLaurie is standing in her nightgown. I do not exaggerate, she did this. And she didn't even let her long red hair flow freely about her waist. She did. She did. But she had a whip in her hand that she's cracking down again, and again on a little 8-year-old slave girl. Now, a little girl had made a mistake while coming through Madame's long red tresses. She encountered a tangle at the end, and instead of combing it up from the bottom, good girl, she yanked the comb through. This sent Delphine into a fit of rage. Madame LaLaurie picked up her whip, chased that little girl onto the gallery, cornered her against the bars. The child curled to a fetal position against the rails to give herself protection. However, when she flinched, she got stuck in the bars and couldn't get away. While the crowd called out for her to stop this cruelty, Madame LaLaurie raised her whip a final time, let out a long laugh, and swung it down but made no contact because the little girl had pushed with her legs through the bars and fell 3 stories to impact on the flagstones of the courtyard. One of the witnesses, wealthy white slave-owning man, very offended by this, goes and tells the sheriff about it. The sheriff gets there, he found the child's body floating face down in the shallow well inside the courtyard. After recovering the corpse, he brought Delphine up on formal charges of murdering a slave. Now, under our laws, there were strict penalties if you abused the slave's right. You could be put in jail, big fine of money, take away your right to own slaves. This judge was in front of her husband. He fined her $500. $500. For the murder of an 8-year-old little girl. Proving that New Orleans has finally become like the rest of this country, where you're innocent until proven wealthy. Don't believe me? You ask Ken Lay or O.J. Simpson. They'll tell you all about it. Delphine LaLaurie, coincidentally, had $500 plus carriage change in her pocketbook when she showed up to court that day. Ain't that lucky for her? We know this because of 2 newspaper reports. One is from the Picayune. However, the Picayune would not run this story for at least another 48 years because it was not something, in their opinion, white, polite society would care to read about at this time. I'm glad the New Orleans Bee did in the gospel columns of George Washington Cable. He was in court that day. He hated her. Wasn't front page. But all these rumors are complete fabrications. None of that is true. These are vicious rumors and lies made up by jealous debutante witches with a capital B who want to get even because they're not invited to the party. It's not true. Delphine wasn't charged. And they lived in this house for 4 years. So now, there was another set of rumors that went around about the LaLauries, but these were never talked about in newspapers or public forums, not ladies' hair salons, that's for sure. They came from the men who actually attend the party. You know, where they're hanging out after the party at their wealthy social clubs on the edge of town, hiding behind their cigars, smoking their status. They made comments about how the slaves in this house were underfed, skeletal thin,